good evening, a good kvittel, a good gebencht yor, a gemar tov, a gemar chasima tova. And we are now basking in the luster and the beauty and the dignity of the 4 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkos. And I want to begin with something I said last week, because I did not share with you what the Vilna Gaon says on that inyan, and I think it's an important thing to be aware of. I asked, why is it, and it's the Torah Shulchan Aruch's question, why don't we have Sukkos after Pesach? Because that's when we went out of Mitzrayim, and that's when we enjoyed the little huts and the Ananei HaKavod. So I told you that the reason I would suggest is that on Rosh Hashanah it's dinim, and all the Averis that are all baskets full of shoigegim, unintentional Avera. I mean, we come into Rosh Hashanah with all the mezidim, with all the intentional Averis, but after Rosh Hashanah, we elevate it to Yom Kippur, and on Yom Kippur it becomes unintentional, because out of yira, out of fear of mi yichya, mi yomos, of all the things of Yom Kippur, so we bring it up with tshuva me'yira up to, the Gemara says, up to shoigegim, unintentional. But then I said to you, but then it goes a higher level, because of what Moshe Rabbeinu asked, that he have the power of Hoshana Rabbah, and that nothing's sent off, and it's only finalized on Hoshana Rabbah. So therefore, we have to have Sukkos after Yom Kippur, so that it should go into the realm of Tshuva Me'ahava, and all of the Averis that we threw in Rosh Hashanah to Tashlach now become mitzvahs, from those intentional to the unintentional to the mitzvahs. And that's why we go back on after Sukkos and we draw water to bake our matzahs with. Excuse me, because the water that had the intentional, then the unintentional now is filled with mitzvahs, the tshuva me'ava of Sukkos. And that Reb Baruch Mezhebush says that's why we go for Mayim Shalom, because now the rivers, the lakes are all filled with water, filled with mitzvahs karimon, like a pomegranate that has so many seeds in it. That's how we have the mitzvahs. And that's what we spoke about. But the Vilna Gaon says that when the Yidden left Mitzrayim and they set out on their journey, and they came to the Yam, and they came out of the Yam, and they were traveling, what protected them? It was the Ananei HaKavod. And indeed, according to one opinion, that's why we have Sukkos. We go out and eat, and many sleep in the Sukkah. Now, that Ananei HaKavod, says the Vilna Gaon, left, and he brings a medrash, a Yalkut from somewhere to prove the point, that the Ananei HaKavod, the clouds of glory, which provided such a wide range of protection, and not just protection from the scorpions and from the snakes that were all over the midbar, that they couldn't touch a yid. They were under the Ananei HaKavod. So says the Vilna Gaon, the Ananei HaKavod left Klal Yisrael when they did the Aveira of the golden calf, the Egel Hazov. They lost the protection of the Ananei HaKavod, But after Yom Kippur of Salachti Kidvarecha, it came back. And that's why Yom Kippur has to be before Sukkos, and Sukkos has to be after Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So says the Vilna Gaon. And that Anania, excuse me, I did get on Yom Kippur a little bit of a cold. Maybe it's not so little. Excuse me. So we know the Anania Kavod had miraculous power, that the Yidden for 40 years in the Midbar did not have to change their clothes. That means even the younger people that were 8 and 10 and were wearing smaller clothes, when they became adults, they didn't have to buy or find new clothes. The clothes automatically, because of the Anania Kavod, grew with the person. And as I told you in the past, it washed, it ironed, it starched everything that was under the level of what they were wearing was miraculous because of the Anania Kavod. So when Klal Yisrael lost it, it was a big loss, but it came back, says, from Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, when they lost it, it went to the 17th day of Av, into the 10th day, 17th day of Elul, and then into the 10th day of Tishrei, Yom Kippur, and they got it back. The Anania Kavod. Now, the Pasuk says, Ulakachtem lochem bayom harishon. Take on the first day, which we know means the first day of Sukkos, but the Gemara asks, V'chi bayom harishon? What? It's on the first day? It's the 15th day. In other words, when we mention dates in the Torah, we say according to the day of the month, like Yom Kippur is the 10th, or Chamisha Asar is Sukkos, or Chamisha Asar Tesvav is Pesach. That is how we refer to the date, and here the Pasuk is calling it Bayom HaRishon, the first day. And that's why the Gemara asks, it's the first day? It's not the first day. So answers the Gemara that Rishon, it's called Rishon because it's the Rishon L'cheshben Avonos. That after Yom Kippur, Klal Yisrael comes out clean. Now, when do the Averos really start? On Sukkos. Why? Do you think that no Yid does any Avera between Yom Kippur and Sukkos? That the Gemara should say that it's considered Rishon because it's Rishon hu l'cheshben avonos. That on the first day of Sukkos is when people start really doing Averas. But the Meforshim explain that the 4 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkos are so high that with the slightest effort, a Yid could be clean from Avera those 4 days. It's the Shem Havaya. It's Yud Kei Vav Kei. Today was the Yud. Tonight that I'm giving the shir, Yud Bais Tishrei, is the first Hey of the Shem Havaya. And if a person wants to talk Lashon Hara or do an Avera, with a drop, usually you have to muster and marshal such strength to be able not to fall in. But on these 4 days, we are able to override the current to be schlepped into the evil, to the dirt. But when it comes Sukkos, it's true we have the Yom Tov of Sukkos, which are special days. But when a Yid, because there's so much Kedusha, then if the Yetzer Hara appears, he can fall in easier than he would fall in even on those 4 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkos. And that's why the Gemara says it's Rishon Hu L'Cheshbon Avonos. Another thing that the Gemara said, that the Mekubalim say, is that Rishon refers often to Adam Harishon. We call him Adam Harishon. He was the first man. And when he was told, says the Arizal, not to eat from the Eitz Hadas, it was only from when he was born, which was the 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the 9th hour of the day, until Kiddush. Because Arizal held that it was grapes that were there and that he ate from, but if he would have waited 3 hours, he could have made Kiddush on those grapes. And that's why we make Kiddush. One of the reasons, besides for what the Torah requires us to be masker, the Kedusha of Shabbos and all of that, is to be mesaken. What happened with those 3 hours that he did not have the patience to wait from 3 till 6. And the death and the sickness and being out of Olam Haba. Don't forget, Adam Harishon in the beginning was not just like the days of Mashiach, Yemos HaMashiach, or even Tchias HaMesim. It was higher, it was Olam Haba. So he had everything and anything, but he didn't have the patience. But there are others who disagree with the Arizal and say it was not grapes, but it was an esrog. And when we take after Yom Kippur and we wiped out all of the basic Averis, we turn back, and that's why the Pasuk calls it Ulakachtem lochem bayom harishon. That first day of Rishon, the first day of the world, Rishon, Adam Harishon, that he took an esrog, and that's what he ate from. We are mesaken after Yom Kippur when we finish with Klal Yisrael and our individual families and ourselves doing the Slicha Mechil and Kapara process to usher ourselves into a year which is filled with only good, but we have to first wipe the slate clean. Like I told you, that's why we have Kol Nidre, for all of our talking and promising and saying and with our mouths, that's Kol Nidre. But then the rest of the day is a long process to get ourselves to a point that we can thrive for the upcoming year. So we take a lulav esrog and the other minim, the hadassim and the aravos, to be able to swing into a framework that we can maximize. Don't forget, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we were crying, Mi Yichya, Mi Yomos. You think of your friends that died that year. You think of family members that died that year. We expressed it that now we're standing before things are being signed off on. Are we going to make it through the year? We're not going to make it through the year. Mi Yichya, Mi Yomos. And now we're after Yom Kippur, and Baruch Hashem, we're given the gift of life, which is the biggest and the best. You don't have any opportunity. If a person's not alive, they don't have opportunity. How much opportunity and how well they use the opportunity, that's up to the person. It's up to the person. But the opportunity is there. Hashem opens up a shefa rav, tremendous goodness, and we have to seize upon it. So we come into Sukkos. Now I spoke, before we hit Sukkos, the Koznitzer Maggid, who many say his Yortzeit is Erev Sukkos, some say it's the second day of Chol HaMoed, but the Koznitzer Maggid made a statement that except for Purim, there's no bigger day in the year to give tzedakah. Why? He said because the last letter of the Yud Kei Vav Kei is the Hey, that's the mitzvahs. And we all know the biggest mitzvah is giving tzedakah. It doesn't say by tefillin or Shabbos, Mevi Geula, or Tatzil Mimaves, but it says it by tzedakah. So he held, but why would he say, if it's Mevi Geula, for instance, what does that have to do with the first day, with Sukkos in general? Now, I told you that the theme and the ability to propel oneself into the realm of the highest level, that when gifts are given out, that we can do it and take part in all of the gifts. And Sukkos, the first day of Sukkos, we learn the Haftorah of Zechariah that talks about Gog uMagog, which is right before the Geula Shlema, and is something that we are able to tangibly hold on to propel ourselves and grab onto it and be part of Geula. Now we find that the Gemara, for instance, says, and the Haftarah that I just mentioned from Zechariah, that's what he talks about, the Geula Shlema. The Meforshim say, why was it called Gog uMagog? Gog, because he wanted to be like a roof, like a Gog, above HaKadosh Baruch Hu and above Klal Yisrael. This Russia, that there was this Milchama of Gog uMagog. But the idea that he wanted to proclaim that he is the majesty of the world, and that was his kavanah, as we know. I mean, he had a big mapala, and right before Mashiach, when there'll be Gog uMagog, some said that the Second World War with all the Kedoshim and Tahirim that were killed and sacrificed, that was Gog uMagog. We don't have to go through it again. Maybe last Simchas Torah in Eretz Yisrael, those 1,300 people, children, burnt alive, violated. Look what happened. The meanness, and they want to sit down at a ceasefire table when they at the same breath say, we're waiting for the opportunity to do October 7th again. But they want a ceasefire. Ceasefire with who? With the guy that's pointing the gun and starting to pull the trigger? How could you have a ceasefire with that type of people, with the people involved? But the point being that the Gemara says that when Mashiach will come, that the Goyim are going to complain to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they're going to say, listen, you went around to all the people and you asked, do you want the Torah? And we asked, what's in it? You can't kill, you can't be immoral, you can't steal. And we turned it down, because how can we live a life without immorality? But HaKadosh Baruch Hu answers them. The Gemara says this, and says, you know what, let me take a mitzvah and see how you do it. This is by the Moshe Mashiach. And all the goyim are going into gigantic sukkah. And it's going to be hot. Now, when it's hot by us, we stay in the sukkah. We make a bracha. We thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for every minute we're in the sukkah. The schach is the shechina. And that's why some hold, even though in Shulchan Aruch it says you're supposed to sleep in a sukkah, but there are tzaddikim from 200 years ago that said don't sleep in the sukkah. Because if you have, while you're sleeping, a bad machshava, you're violating the shechina, the schach that you're under. You're enveloped by the shechina. So you can't be, so there's many people who do sleep, many people who don't sleep, whatever your meaning is, that's what you should do. But the reasoning of those who don't sleep is because they're worried about chas v'shalom violation of the shechina and not having the proper tahara and kedusha in the sukkah. So the Gemara says that it's going to get hot, and Yidden, when it's very hot in the sukkah, they still sit there, they eat, they may not be so comfortable, but they're being mekayim the mitzvah, and they're eating there, and there are many people who do not even drink water out of the sukkah, even though it is mutter 100%. A person could eat an apple out of the sukkah, he can't eat cake, he can't drink wine or grape juice, he can't make hamotzi, but a person has to be inside of the sukkah for that. But there are those who are mahader, and they will not eat anything or drink anything out of a sukkah, because it's an opportunity. Even though you don't make a leishev basukkah at that time, when you, let's say, eat just an apple, you don't have to make a bracha leishev basukkah, only on cake, wine, and hamotzi. But the Gemara says that the goyim will run out of the sukkahs and give the sukkah a big kick. And some speak about the fact that if they were so hot and they have to go out of the sukkah, we could understand it. But why the kick of the sukkah? Because there are many things that we say that, like Gilgul Shavua, that if a person has to make a Shavua, a oath, he has to swear in Bezdin, and he has to also swear for something else. When he swears the first, it's like a Gilgul Shavua we can roll over that accomplishes both at one time. The kick brings out what was always inside the goyim: a hate, a jealousy, a bitterness, and that's why they were not because they couldn't steal. That was the surface of it. But inside, such endless jealousy and such endless hate that kick showed the essence of who and what they are towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu and towards Yidden. And as the Kotzker Rebbe was once asked, why is it that by the Goyim they have the biggest churches, they have the most beautiful gardens outside the churches, and by most Yidden we have barely the shtibel until we put something together. It's with the sweat of our brow and the blood of our veins to accomplish to build a yeshiva, to build a... So the Kotzker answered sharply, as he usually did, and said, because the Goyim are serving the sheker, the falsehood, with emes, with honesty. And we Yidden are serving the emes with sheker. that the truthfulness and the level of our loyalty falls too often much too short. So the idea of Sukkah is Geula, the Meforshim say. And that's why of all the things that the Goyim could be tested with when the Geula Shlema comes, they're not tested with anything else. They're tested with one thing, Sukkah. And that differentiates between the ones who have won the lottery and have Geula and will for the next 400 million or 800 million years bask in the glory of the Shekhinah and have the beautiful nachas and the thriving level of hugging HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Goyim won't. And that's why the first Navi of the first day is Zechariah talking about Gog and Magog. And that's the reason why when we leave the Sukkah at the end of the 7 days, we say a tefillah about that we should be Zoicha, not next year again to Sukkah, but to the Oro Shel Levyasan, to the whale, the great whale, that there will be a Sukkah made and all the people will enjoy the Levyasan. So you see that Chag HaSukkos is enveloped and cloaked and all encompassed under the umbrella of Geula Shalema. Now, we have to realize that Ushpizin come into our Sukkah. There is a taich that there is a ha'ora on Pesach that they come, but what it says openly and beferish is that every night, and many tzaddikim conversed with Avram Avinu the first night and with Yitzchak Avinu the second night, that this was real. It wasn't just some interesting nice idea that we have visitors and that the avos are there. The tzaddikim at the level saw them and discussed with them. But the Zohar HaKadosh says that there is a condition to get the Ushpizin. And a person has to have a guest in his house, in his sukkah. And so much so that it says that if they come, the Ushpizin, and they see there's no guest, that they turn around and they do not join the chorus of the singing and the Divrei Torah and everything that is in the sukkah. Now, I don't want to touch a very maybe sensitive thing. Sometimes it's almost impossible to get a guest. In most cases, it's because you haven't tried hard enough. There's somebody in the shul, or there's somebody on your block that you know is a Yid. Maybe he's not from, but maybe if you set the right tone and you sent him a challah l'kovit Shabbos, and then you invited him once or twice to your Shabbos meal in your house, that you could get, and then you have him there Sukkos for at least one meal or 2 meals or 3. But you open up the gate of invitation and taste to create and to cultivate the thirst and the desire. Even if he doesn't become from yet, your gain is that the Ushpizin come, as the Zohar HaKadosh says. When you have that oirach, you're doing more for yourself than when you have a guest, then you're doing the chicken and the fish and for the guest. So there should at least be an effort to get a guest. A person can just say, listen, there's no guest, no one called. Did you try? Were you motivated enough to have Ushpizin in your sukkah? Did you try to get the guest somewhere? Now, I want to mention to you that we have through the gift of Simcha, and that's a third reason why Sukkos has to come after Yom Kippur. Because if you remember in Parshas Nitzavim Vayelech, Nitzavim, I told you what Rashi says in the beginning, that after the 98 klolos that took place with the Tochacha in Parshas Kisavo, that Rashi says and brings the Medrash, Horikuf Peneim, their faces turn green. Look at all these curses. How are we ever going to survive? We're not angels, we're human beings. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, "Atem nitzavim hayom kolchem." You got so scared by the klolos, you're standing here now, alive and well, with all of those klolos and everything that you went through, that you can survive, and you just have to try to be an erlich of fine yid, and you will get to a position of prominence and promise when you do adhere to the Torah. Now we know that on Sukkos, if you add up all the karbanos that Klal Yisrael brought on the days of Sukkos, it was 98 lambs. Kavasim, they're also like from the family, it's all the family of lambs, goats, lambs. And there, if you add it up, it's 98. So the Mefarshim say that the end of Kisavo, of the Tochacha, it told you the reason why you fell in so bad that such terrible things would happen to you. And the Pasuk says openly, Tachas asher lo avadeto es Hashem Elokecha b'simcha uvetuv levov, that you didn't fully appreciate the gifts of the mitzvahs and the Torah that I gave you, which were like delicacies, spiritual delicacies that you never had, you never enjoyed in your life. And you did mitzvahs, but it was, okay, I have to do it. There was a sluggishness with it. And the component, the cementing factor, the backbone of your avodah was not besimcha. Thrilled. When a person wins the lottery and he's being driven to collect the gift, every second he's in that car, he is overwhelmed with the joy that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent him such a gift that he's going to be able to live the rest of his life never worrying about a bill, never worrying about anything. In the physical, mundane, financial world. But that's how we should be doing a mitzvah. When a person's going to shul to answer 10 Yeheshmei Rabbas with Kedusha that the Malachim, the angels, had to wait 2,100 years, the angel fighting with Yaakov, until he could say the Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. One time. We could say it in shul 10 times. If we have 10 minyanim and we are here, we're there, we can. But even if it's only one minyan, you can answer to Kedusha every day. Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzavakos, Malach Ha'Oretz Kavodo, and Baruch Kavod Hashem Mimkomo. But Malachim can't do that. We should cherish it with such a thirst and a delicious anticipation of answering to Kedusha. And all the things that we have, the experience of being in shul, not thinking about how many cell phone calls do I have to make, and looking 15 times at his cell phone during davening. And then is the first one to run out of the door by Olenu. So we have to just stop and realize, and that's why the 98 korbanos were as an antidote to the 98 klolos of the Tochacha, and it was only when it was wrapped in the package of Simcha of Sukkos could you undo all that terrible, the roots of evil that Nebuch men lived through. And it's a constant fight. No one is exempt, and no one, except a person becomes a tzaddik gomer, they're in the realm now, they've broken the ice, and they've broken the iron gates, and they're in a different realm. But I'm talking about all of us, simple people. So I can't underscore to you the inyan of Simcha more and more and more. Now, I want to say to you that going into the Sukkah, the Chazal, the Kadmoinim, the Mekubalim all said, is equal to going into a mikveh. We know that when a person could be spiritually with mud all over himself, and he goes into a mikveh, and he dips up and down, and a person should dip more than once, because it says the first dip takes off the mud, but to be mamshech the kedusha is the second, third, fourth, fifth, eighth time of dipping up and down. But he comes out of tohor. So, and that's the reason that the word sukkah is samech vav chof hei begematria 91. A samech is 60, a vav is 6, a chof is 20, that's 86, and the last hey is 5. That's begematria 91, which is yud k vav k and adna, aleph daled nun yud. Aleph daled nun yud is begematria 65, and yud k vav k is begematria 26. That's 91. That the sukkah is 91, the Shem Havaya and the Shem Adna, and the mikveh is Metayer and Mezachech, and that the full impact of the Shem Havaya and the Shem Adna could come to the person when he comes out of the mikveh. When a person's in the sukkah, it's happening likewise. They all say it. Now, I want to touch on the Nanuim. You know that when we take the Lulav and Esrog, and in the Rishonim, by the way, just Derech Agav, there's a very big shaila. If a person takes a Lulav and an Esrog, and it's before Alos HaShachar, we know that you cannot be Makayim the mitzvah of Lulav and Esrog before Alos HaShachar, 72 minutes before sunrise. So the Rishonim asked the question, what happens if a person is so excited about taking the Lulav and Esrog and he picks it up before the Alos HaShachar and he's holding it when the time comes that he is able to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Lulav and Esrog the minute that Alos HaShachar comes. Now, many say it's not Alos HaShachar, it's a little bit in, because even Talis and Tefillin you can't put on by Alos HaShachar. You have to wait a number of minutes to go in to get closer to the Netz HaChama, to sunrise. But the point that they bring out, and there's a difference of opinion, by the way, in the Rishonim, whether a person who's holding a Lulav and Esrog 20 minutes before the Alos HaShachar. And he's there with it, waiting to make that bracha. Since the pasuk says, "Ulekachtem lochem," you have to take a lulav and esrog. That's part of the mitzvah. It's not just making the bracha and shaking it, but it's the taking. So what happens if you took it? And the Rebbe, the Aruch HaNer has pages on this discussion, whether you're yoitza the lulav and esrog or not. Because do you need to take it at the time when you're allowed to be yoitza the mitzvah? And if you took it and you're holding it already, but you're not taking it, and you're just making the bracha and shaking it, whether you are or are not yoitza the mitzvah. Now, we know that the minig and the halacha is you're supposed to do na'anuim. That means to shake the lulav esrog, the hadassim, and the aravos. And the Sfarim all say that there are different gifts. Now we shake it, most people do it according to the Arizal, that you do to the right first 3 times, then you do to the left 3 times, then to the forward 3 times, then up 3 times, then down, then back. And that is 6 different directions. And says the Arizal that to the right is chesed, and that while a person is chasing away the bad when he takes the lulav and esrog and puts it to the right, but then he draws back all the good of chesed. When he does it to the left, he gets its gvura, he gets rid of all the enemies, and all the mekatrigim, and all the samach mems, and all the ayin horas. And then he's mamshich back the ayin tov, the bracha, without the mekatrigim. And each way this is chesed, that's gevura, and up front is Torah, which every yid, when he has a schus HaTorah, it's tremendous in what it does. It protects the person, it elevates the person, it drenches the person with all sorts of good. And then when you go up, says the Arizal, that's Netzach. Netzach, that we are victorious in our efforts for Avodas Hashem, and victorious and overwinning and claiming victory with all of our enemies. And then going down is Hod. And Hod, many say, is, even though everyone is perfection of a direction and a inyan in heaven, but when you go down and you're in Hod, Hod can, in certain respects, accomplish more than everything else. And that's why Lag BaOmer is on Hod Shebahod. And then going back is Yesod, the Kedusha and the Tahara of Klal Yisrael. So where is Malchus? Because we know that all of these 6 that I just mentioned flow into Malchus, and then it comes out to this world. That is the pipeline that brings it to this world. And I told you at least on 2 occasions, that's why Yaakov Avinu married Rachel first, because he thought, what does he have to marry Leah first? Rachel is Malchus. So everything's going to come through her anyway, so I can marry her first. But the mistake he made was, and that's why it was corrected, Min HaShamayim, through the trickery of Lavan, that he had to marry Leah first because she was Bina. And Bina is much higher than Malchus. It's got to go through Bina into Malchus. And that's why his trickery worked. And Yaakov Avinu ended up first with Leah before he ever married Rachel. So we should know that the Nanuim bring out the unbelievable level of so much that is to be offered just through the Nanuim, and that's the reason we do the Nanuim in Hallel, because the theme of the day is Simcha, and the cementing factor to get where we want to get has to be only with Simcha, and if there's no Simcha, you're not going to get there. So a person has to learn how to divest himself. That means if you're meeting a machutin that your son is going to end up marrying their daughter, you may have been in a bad mood that day from your business or from something that happened. But when these people walk through the front door, it's going to be smiles and shalom aleichem. And the Chag HaSukkos can give us so much. But there is a prerequisite that must be. There has to be a base of simcha, and then we are able to bask and enjoy all the overflow which will knock us off our feet. The simcha in such a level that we are able to go into the Yemos Hashanah, to the days of the year, with a valise filled with the goodies that we could enjoy, and our trip through the days and the weeks and the months and the year. We have our valises filled from what we did on Sukkos. And I also wanted to touch on the Simchas Bais HaShoeva. You know that on the second day of Sukkos, shuls and all over, they celebrate the fact that in the Beis HaMikdash, when they brought a korban, they poured wine. And there was one exception, Sukkos. They poured the wine, v'yayin l'nisko, but they also poured water. Now, it was such a simcha that it reached a level that it hit the faucet of Ruach HaKodesh. And Yoina, who we just yesterday laned about Yoina, the one who ended up in the whale, that he was filled with Ruach, where did he get it from? And the Chazal say, the Medrash says, that he went to a Simchas Bais HaShoeva and he walked out a Navi from the Simchas Bais HaShoeva that was dripping and drenching everyone with Ruach HaKodesh. And he got to the level of not only Ruach HaKodesh and not only Basko, but he got to the level of Nevuah. The Yoina from who went to Nineveh and told them, hey, you better get into order. And in Nineveh, the king was Paro, our Paro from the story of Mitzrayim. And he warned them, I lived through what HaKadosh Baruch Hu can do. And obviously there's a message here and you better heed. And they all put on sackcloth and cried and they did tshuva. But this was through Yoina Hanavi. Yoina was the one who delivered the message, and Yoina was the one who told them what they have to do and what they should do. Now, you'll wonder, why water? I mean, wine is tastier, wine is more expensive. Why the big deal that Asamisha lo ra simchas beis hashoeva lo ra simcha miyomov? His whole life he never saw what the word simcha means. Because you poured some water? But when the world was created and the water, half was put into the heaven, and the other half became the seas, the oceans, the rivers. So, and where does salt come from? Salt comes from the river, from the water. So, The Medrash says that the salt was very, very upset. That the water went up to heaven with the malachim, with everything there. And they were left here at the bottom of an ocean. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Medrash says, said to them, you are going to be, you, the salt, are going to be on every mizbeach with korbanos. Al kol korboncha takriv melech. And they were happy. Now the Medrash says they realized that there would be no Bais Hamikdash for 2,500 years. Till they left Mitzrayim and went out and they had the Mishkan, there was no Mizbeach, there was no salt on the Mizbeach. So their worthiness and usefulness was first coming 2,500 years later. Now, if somebody said to you, oh, you like the brisket, you know what? In around 12 years, I'm going to serve you this brisket. Person, 12 years? I have to wait 12 years? What about on Shabbos? What about on Yom Tov? I have to wait 12 years? The salt was told that they have to wait 2,500 years till there's a Mizbeach. For the klal, there were yechidim. That means when Avram Avinu brought a korban, he put salt on the thing. But I'm not talking about the yechidim. But their salt was mainly for the purpose of Klal Yisrael when they had a Mishkan and then a Bais Hamikdash and a second Bais Hamikdash, that they were able to have the salt on their korbanos. But the lesson we learn is that the salt understood the schus of being on the Mizbeach. And even if you have to wait 2,500 years, you're dancing today because one day my salt is going to be prime item on the Mizbeach with that korban. And the worthiness and the value of having their salt on the Mizbeach outweighed everything. So some Meforshim say that the reason that the Simchas Beis HaShoeva came out through water, because water was like the least worthy, it's the simplest of things. You can get water whenever you want it. You can, average situation, that it's always available, it's the cheapest, and you can get the water. And that's what brought out the best in the Yidden. That they realize simplicity is sometimes the backbone of dignity. And that we can sometimes to soar heavenward with the simplest of the simple. You have no idea when sometimes you just smile at someone and ask them how they are, how you uplifted their spirits and everything around them. Like I told you the story of the Vilna Gaon and the lady that went to collect every year of Shabbos, and one lady that they got from every week was not home, and one of the two saw her across the street coming home, and she pointed. So the other one, who died first, came back b'chalom and said, I just want to tell you one thing, because that's all they're letting me say to you from heaven, is that that day that woman wasn't home, but we came and you pointed that there's a special bushel basket of schusim for that one point. Oh, there she is. There's the lady. She's coming now. And you crossed the street and you got the money. Simplicity can cloak us in the most divine. And that's why the Gemara says that when that Amora went up to Shemayim and he came back, the first thing that he said when they asked him, what did you see? He said, I saw that the people in our shuls who are all sitting in the back row are the ones sitting in the front row up in heaven. And the ones in the front row were all sitting in the back row. That was his first observation. And Tosfos says, who was he referring to? He was referring to Rav Yehuda and Shmuel. Because one day, the Gemara says, a woman threw open the door to the shul and came running into the Bais HaMedrash wailing. So Rav Yehuda, who was the Talmud, said to his Rebbe, Shmuel, I mean, the woman's standing here screaming her head off. Maybe you should ask her what she needs and what she wants. So Shmuel answered and said, I can't ask her. I'm not in charge today here in the Bais HaMedrash. Mar Ukva is in charge in the Bais HaMedrash. So Tosfos says that when that Amora went back from Shemayim and said people who sat up front are now in the back, and those in the back are up front, he was referring to Shmuel and Rav Yehuda. Shmuel was the Rebbe, and because he didn't stop to calm the woman down, he sat in the seat in heaven where the Talmidim sat. And that Rav Yehuda, who was the Talmud, he was sitting in the Rebbe's seat. Can you imagine? It's Tosfos. And Tosfos says, it's not his own pshat, it's from Tekufas Go'oinim he brings it, that for 800 years before him, they said that that's what the Gemara is referring to. In the Tekufas Go'oinim, that they already were made before the Baalei Tosfos put the Tosfos, and Tosfos quotes them. So we see what a simple act of consideration can do. I want to wish each and every one of you, let the simcha of Sukkos permeate and etch into the essence of every fiber of your being and bring out the best of simcha. Put aside the shtusim, the narishkeiten. She said this, he said that. Rise above the occasion and immerse in the sea and river of simcha, and bring down to you and your families the beautiful brachas that you are destined for this year.